Welcome to Disability Empowerment Now, Season 4. I'm your host, Keith Mavidicancini. Today I'm talking to my old friend, Sean Daniels, who is the director of the Recovery Project and the playwright of the brilliant play the White Chip. Sean, welcome to the show.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And you are correct. I have known you for years and years. And so it is an honor to be on your show. And I'm such a fan of all the work that you do. So happy to support in any way.
Thank you. So we met when I was on the board of the Arizona Theater Company and you had been hired as their artistic director. That was back in 17, 18, somewhere around there.
In the before times, as we call it,
Yeah,
everything,
in the before
pre-COVID. Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah, BC is now before COVID,
That's right.
not
That's right.
before Christ,
That's right.
before
Yeah. That's our new. Yeah.
COVID. Yeah,
It's hard.
totally.
It is hard to remember those times, but I'm grateful for
Yes.
the friends that have stuck with us.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how much life has changed in almost every way. Uh, I left the Arizona Theater Company board soon after you left. That was a pure coincidence. I remember we met in person uh, when my parents and I saw your brilliant autobiographical play, The White Chip, which I could rave and rave about for the next 5 hours easily. I'm sure your wife would get pissed at me for keeping you for that long.
Oh,
Uh,
I so appreciate it. And you all came and saw it in New York, which meant so much to me to get that,
yeah,
when the show was there, to get people that flew out to see it and to support it. It was a great moment and really just the beginning of the show's journey, which we
yeah,
did at the time.
yeah, yeah. And so let's start there, talking about the inspiration and the geniuses and the nerves that went into writing, to conceptualizing a auto, autobiographical work that pulls no punches whatsoever. Pardon the language, but that's how brilliant and how unflinching the play is. Take me back to the moment or moments you felt that my story, your life, and the harrowing experience you had with alcohol, how did all that become a play?
It's a great question, and I appreciate you asking. I'd worked in theater my whole life, so I think part of me, when I wanted to figure out how to get this out there, thought like, okay, I'll start with theater. I'll start with the art form that I love and the art form that I truly believe can, uh, create a place where people's hearts and minds can be changed by something. I when I was trying to get sober, and actually there's a monologue in the show that I wrote literally in rehab on like day 5 because I was just struggling and didn't know what to do. And I thought like writing would be a good exercise. And for the most part, it stayed pretty much the same. It's after so many productions and so many workshops, actually this one monologue is pretty consistent. Um, but I couldn't find anything that was funny. I couldn't find anything that had talked about science. I couldn't find anything that wasn't in like 1920s old-timey American Ohio language. And so at some point you just have to say like, well, then shut up and write the thing that you can't find. Try to figure out how do you put it out there? And I really thought I was the only person in the American theater that couldn't hold their liquor. I thought everybody else was having a great time and I was falling apart. And then afterwards, so many people came up and they were like, "Oh my God, I'm so glad that you're sober. Just so you know, I've been sober for 7 years." And you were like, "Oh my God, that's great." But like, where the F were you this entire time?
Yeah,
Why in supposedly the most empathetic, community-based, um, dripping with liberals industry, can we not talk about the actual issues that are going
I
on
I love
inside of
how you described dripping with liberal.
Well, I just,
I love
it's
that.
you think this would be the safest place, and yet we've all and listen, this is not anything about the theater industry. This has become part of the larger project that the stigma around addiction is intense and is concrete, and we're not represented properly in pop culture, and people get nervous that you aren't going to be able to do your job regardless of how many years of sobriety you have. So there's a reason why back in the 1920s when Alcoholics Anonymous started that they said like, and don't tell anybody. And everybody said like, yeah, great, we'll not tell anybody. And so I think it made sense then, but I do also feel that, people always say you're only as sick as your secrets. And I feel like we have an entire
Yeah,
industry with which inside it people are struggling and afraid to talk about it. And honestly, where now that I work, in the recovery project, we spend a lot of time talking about other industries. It is not specific to just the arts, though it's pretty rampant in the arts. It's worse in, other things like construction. You see that there is rampant misuse
heck.
and and everything, right? That we
Yeah,
now know 1 in 3 people live in a house that is affected by addiction, and 60
yeah.
million people are living in recovery. So that's, if there's 3 people listening to this, one of you has to deal with it. And, it's so funny that you say the nerves about putting up the show because so the show is about my own personal journey and
Well,
about,
let me let me clarify. The nerves, the creative nerves
oh,
of N- not why did you put up this show? Because I have nothing but the deepest respect but for you for putting up the show. But in seeing it, and I'm sure in reading it, it's so unflinching and so brutally honest that as a creative, we're both creative people, talking about a harrowing experience that really has formed your entire adult and professional life. I can only imagine the the creative jitters, nerves of am I being too personal? Will people actually like this? Will they relate to it? Of course, now we know they very much will, but when you're at the computer staring at a blank Word document, you don't know that. You have all these hopes and fears but you don't know. And so, yeah, I wanted to clarify, not that I was saying the nerve of you for putting this brilliant, breathtaking work of art on stage. Damn you. It's like I'm trying to go back to the writing room. And did you have to really wrestle with your inner demons and your inner doubts and fears, putting them all on the page?
I was lucky in that I co-created a show called The Lion that Benjamin Schroyer wrote and performed in. And one of the mottos that we had in putting it together, and this is when you're the director, right? So you have like
Yeah,
nothing but great ideas on how other people should write their shows. And but the thing that we said was, and this piece of advice was given to him, and we latched onto it. If you want to write a good song, write something that you don't want the audience to know about you. And if you want to write,
that's brilliant. That's a brilliant piece of advice.
yeah, and if you want to write a great song, write something that you don't want to know about yourself. And so
That's even more brilliant.
And that was really the rules that we lived by in terms of doing it. And so when it came time to write the white chip, it was like I need to hold myself to the same standards because I'd also seen it worked. And the Lion can't be stopped. It just got announced that it's gonna do an Asian tour and launch out of Tokyo in
That's amazing.
December. Yeah, so we're excited to go do that. But so I had to hold myself to the same standard, which is like, if we're going to talk about this, then we need to really talk about it. And my favorite book about addiction, which is slightly controversial, is a book called The Night of the Gun by David Carr. And he is
What
so
an interesting title.
yeah, well, yeah, it's about a night that like some people remember him having a gun and some people don't, and so he investigates his own life because he's an investigative reporter for the New York Times. But he is so unflinching about himself that the reason that I love it is that because I feel like what he's describing is the real thing. And we could sanitize it so that it could be popular. And like at one point he does many regrettable things, which there's not a single person that struggles with addiction that doesn't come out with that on the other end of it, except that, the what we are taught in pop culture that addiction is like Luke Perry stumbles out of the woods and he's got two tiny bottles and he gets some help. And it's like the lightest of addiction anywhere, as opposed to what really happens, which is what we call the wreckage of our past, which is that it's over and over again. So I wanted to, between Benjamin and between reading David Carr's book, like how to hold myself to the same standard of if we're going to investigate it, how to really dive in. But I didn't mind that you said the nerve to put it on because I will tell you every single performance of it, um, from the very beginning at Merrimack Rep to our opening where we had our producers Hank Azaria and Jason Biggs and John Larroquette there before the
Wait,
show
say
starts.
those names again?
So the producers when we did it recently were it was Annalie Ashford, who was our lead producer. It was Hank Azaria, who's an amazing, voice actor, John Larroquette, Jason Biggs. And at that performance was Edie
Those
Falco.
are big, big names.
Yeah,
And
big names. But
the,
even then, before every performance, part of me goes like, "Oh my God, when they watch this show, they're going to find out." Like, even though I have written it, I have gone to great lengths to get it produced. Millions of dollars have been raised, like marketing teams have been hired. There's a part of me that goes like, "Oh my God, you have to get out of there." Because after this show happens, they're gonna know. And that shows like, so when we talk about stigma and we talk about like the things, self-stigma is such a huge part of it, right? Because even on our own level, we are nervous to tell people, we try to lighten what it is, we don't want to come forward. And, we look at other diseases, which I hope that no one ever gets cancer. But if you do get cancer, what you will do will be different from when you discover that you have substance use condition, which is that when you have cancer, like you will tell people, you will go tell your work. People will run marathons for you. You will go into work and they'll come up with a work plan on how you can reduce yourself to be able to take the time to get better. Your family will rally around you. And people that have gone through it before will instantly reach out and be a resource for you. And that's amazing. I just want that. I want that for the addiction world. I want you to be able to say, this has been considered a medical disorder, a brain disorder since the late 70s. And I
Yeah.
now struggling with it, and people in the community can come forward and figure out how to help. Your workplace can figure out how to help. I'm getting off subject, but there was a great statistic recently that 65% of people that overdose were employed, which means that those people were at work. Somebody saw them. They were going into the office, which means that, these aren't bums under overpasses that are dying.
Yeah.
These are the people amongst us.
Yeah.
One more quick fact. Overdosing and dying by overdose is the number one killer of people 18 to 45. So you and I,
Wow.
well, I'm not in that group of people because I'm a little old, but if you are between 18 and 45, you are more likely to die of an overdose than you are cancer, car accident, guns, COVID, any of the things that we spend our political capital talking about.
Wow. Wow.
Um, and also, 18 to 45, like I'm not an expert on workforces, but that's kind of the workforce of our country. You can
Yeah,
begin to
that's
see
the prime time.
that is the time, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what emboldens me to continue to do this work and to put it out there. And even though I'm terrified that everyone's going to find out, that's where the nerve comes from. To be
Yeah.
able to say like oh my God, they're going to find out. But when we did the White Chip in New York this last time, after every performance, somebody came forward and said, "Okay, I'm ready to get help." And our
Wow.
our poor actors are we're just, of course, like ill-equipped to be able to deal with that. They're not like trained medical professionals or peer counselors. Like
Nope.
they're just great actors. And so they
Yeah.
were in the show and they were like, "I'm gonna get you a house manager or something." So our producers were really great. They put together like a 12 QR codes for people to be able to check in and get the help that they need, based on what it is, whether it's whatever different group you're looking for. And after every single performance, somebody came forward and said that they're ready to get help. And so I feel like that's where the nerve comes from, even though I'll admit it's terrifying. It's terrifying every time that the show goes up because part of me is always ashamed of what I went through.
So, what would you like having big names attached to it that wanted to invest in it? Not to mention the brilliant actors who performed it night after night. But what would you like? Having people you now know say, yes, this project is very worthwhile. I want to put time, energy, effort, and money into it, and I want to support you getting your message out there. What would that like?
So one of the stories that we've just begun to talk about is that Matthew Perry was supposed to be one of the
Yes.
producers on our show. And so on the day that actually it was a year ago yesterday, when we got the news that he was going to be a part of it, it put us through the roof. And then he passed away a couple days.
Oh, I can imagine how that would put anyone through the roof. Um,
Um,
oh my, yeah,
I
yeah.
know. And then he passed away several days later. And then right after that, Hank Azaria came forward and said, like, okay, I'll add my name and be a part of it. And so it's a real roller coaster because to change national narratives, you need the public and you need the private and you need pop culture, right? And
Yeah,
so those are the three areas that you need to be doing. And so it really felt like, okay, we have a chance to really change this conversation by these people, adding their name to it, coming to opening night. Hank created a very sweet video about it. And so let's be honest, we knew that as they came forward, it was going to help more people to see it. And so
yeah,
when our goal is for less people to die, adding them onto it. And what I love about, and we just honored Hank Azaria, and I'm so
yeah,
grateful to do it because I feel like honestly that's what the movement needs. Like I'm happy to like tell everybody in the world my recovery story, but we need celebrities, we need millionaires, we need titans of industry that are sober to come forward and for people to know like not only is it possible, but when we say that, like, what does that mean? But it's like, does it just mean that like things were awful and now they'll be a little less worse? No, we need to show people who are not only recovered, but have thrived since then. There's a term called
yes.
post-traumatic growth, which is to say, like, how not only did you
Wait,
survive,
say that term again?
I love it. It's new. I work with professor of stigma, Dr. Kasilik, down here at USF, and she talks about post-traumatic growth, which is to say that not only did you survive something, but like, how is it that your life is improved because of the trauma that you encountered? Like, how is it that
Wow.
because of it, you're able to do things that you couldn't do before? And it reframes the conversation away from just who survived what, but like how did the things that you survive allow you to be able to do things that you couldn't do before, right? And so like that's the conversation. And let's be honest, celebrity in our country we know plays a huge amount,
Yeah,
Beyonce was gonna sing with Kamala, and so it's like that's news,
yeah.
because that's a little sexier than like economics experts talking about like like what her plan is going to be, even though it
Yeah,
probably affects
just
all of
a
us more,
tad
just a
bit
tad more, even though it
sec.
doesn't have anything to do with us. So I'm grateful for the celebrities to come forward. I'm grateful for Jason Biggs to sit right behind me opening night, and talk about his sobriety. Um, and I'm grateful for like all the different celebrities that came to the run of the show. And so I just think like that's part of the work that has to happen, which is that like you need to know that that your friends are in recovery, and you also need to know that people you admire as celebrities are in recovery. And that's how we change the national narrative.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible. And everything you just said, it's so on the money. What would you like leaving the Arizona Theater Company and coming to the recovery project across the country and the work you're currently doing?
I mean, I guess I will say we loved our time in Arizona. We miss it every day. We loved the staff that was put together. Now they're kind of scattered to the world, but we loved working with them every day, and we loved the audiences down there that were a part of it. The opportunity to, figure out how to take the experiences that we've had and be able to use this art form. It became clear at one point, like, what do you want to dedicate your life to? What do you want to spend the next years?
Exactly
Is it
right.
is it slightly getting people to accept, different types of art form or different types of stories? Or is it the fact that when we talk about post-traumatic growth, that like someone dies from addiction in our country every 3 minutes, right? So by the time that this interview will be done, right, we will have lost 10 to 20 people. And for all of us that have ever lost anybody, you know that one person is not like that's not one person, right? That's a family. That is for people
Yeah,
forever ruptured and changed. And so they imagine, okay, so by the end of this conversation, 20 families will be forever changed. And so the opportunity to get to try to focus not on, moving a needle slightly, but to be able to focus on changing lives, um, has been an honor of a lifetime to be able to do and to be able to focus on that. And I have no doubt, we talk about it all the time. At some point, we will get back to running a theater. At some point, we're excited to get back to running a theater. But I will say, it is working in this part will only make running a theater that much better because in theater we talk all the time about being like community leaders, and
Yeah,
we mean it, but we also mean it in the sense of like, and then you come see a play, you know what I mean, like, which if you
yeah,
don't want to do, I don't know what it is. And so right now, we spend a lot of time working with faith leaders, and we spend a lot of time working with first responders, and we spend a lot of time working with police, and right now we're setting up our time working with veterans, and just so it's like, oh, actually, when you work in the health and human services industry, like, you got to be a community leader. You got to really meet people
yeah,
where they're at. It's not about getting them into your building to see your play, but it's about like, okay, how do we get naloxone into the hands of police officers so that when they encounter someone having an overdose, that they can do it. They can figure out how to revive them. You need to get faith leaders to be preaching about what it is that the steps can be taken so that people don't overdose in their congregation when they're away from them. Like, it's a different level of community involvement that I never, in my 30 years of working in theater, have never been asked to do that type of community duty. And now I do it every day. Now I spend forever directly in our community, meeting people where they are. And that is the honor of a lifetime. And so we will get back to running a theater, I have no doubt, at some point. But right now, it feels like we're making a difference. And so we want to ride this as long as we can.
so talk more about everything that the recovery project does, the main initiatives, and what it takes to get those main initiatives off the ground.
So the main thing that the Recovery Project tries to do is to use the arts to change the narratives of addiction. There's a lot of studies about how national narratives change, and in all of them, the arts are the answer. There was a great study that came out about gay marriage and how, when Barack Obama ran for president, he was against gay marriage. Now you can't say what he said in Florida and run for city council as a Democrat, right? So
Yeah.
like, national narratives have changed. No, most likely Florida will legalize marijuana in 2 weeks because Arizona did a couple of years ago. Like, that's a sentence that wouldn't even make sense 10 years ago. You would never believe it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, no, you're absolutely right about that.
So to be able to be a part of how those narratives change, and the answer was the arts, right? The answer was, this is what the study said, that when, well, how do we feel something different than we felt 20 years ago? It really was that, TV happened, Ellen came out, Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, Angels in America happened,
Yeah.
The Normal Heart played at the Public, and Larry Kramer stood out front and handed out flyers to every person that was leaving until Reagan would talk about the gay cancer. That really,
Yeah.
uh, that Magic Johnson got HIV, and we all thought he was going to be dead within days, and he's currently a billionaire in better shape than any of us. And that is a
Yeah.
long time ago. So like, those events happen as we look back, and you realize like, oh, that changed the narratives, right? Like, anybody, you used to only see LGBT plus characters in terms of their trauma in popular culture, and then as like a wacky best friend, and then as, maybe a lead character in a movie that is just for them. And now you can exist, and your sexuality doesn't have to be a defining characteristic of why you exist within a pop culture story, right? But
Yeah.
in addiction, if someone in recovery shows up, I promise you they will overdose or relapse at the end of season one, right? We only exist in terms of to be threats for the other people that are in it. And so
I wish with all my heart I could say you're wrong. We both know you are not wrong.
I'm currently watching a TV show in season one where someone's in recovery. So I'll let you know if when I get to the end if it changes. But so it's like those narratives still exist, right? And so we
Yeah.
have to um, move the needle, and I think we can do that through the arts. So I want to support artists. I want to figure out how to get artists the help that they need. And then I also want to use artists to change national narrative. So it's commissioning plays, creating animated shorts, creating a warm line for artists to be able to call into, to make sure that we just announced an initiative with the Clinton Foundation to put naloxone in every Broadway house so that audiences and backstage people have access to what is essentially a life-saving drug if you ever need it.
Wow. And so, what did it take for the recovery project to effectively do the vital and life-saving work that it does?
It takes money as always, but we have been lucky to be incubated by a couple different organizations as we got going. We started at Florida Studio Theater, then we moved to an organization called Live Tampa Bay, and then we'll see what the future holds. Um, but right now, the main thing that it takes is community partners. That is our big. So if anyone's listening to this and they feel like it's a good fit for how they could be, that is the main thing that we're looking for. Money exists in health and human services. It's a different amount of money than you see in the arts. Uh,
Yeah.
and being able to get it is great, but we got to figure out like then how to put the ground troops together to be able to really make sure that we're in the right places so that people can get the resources that they need. So we're always looking for community partners. That is our big push at this point.
So you seem really, really happy in what you're doing. Uh, I hope that comes through loud and clear in this episode. How does that feel? Does it make the, in your mind, does it make the hauling experience somehow worth it to know that you're at this point, not only in your personal life, but that you are doing what your and I don't know why I'm getting emotional here. That came on really quickly. Don't really get emotional on air. Uh, Sorry about that.
No,
I
that's what
shouldn't
it's all
have
about.
apologized for that. Does it make what you're doing now, which feels and sounds like your life's calling, does it make what you went through and the shame and the guilt of going through it and what you unflinchingly put your family through, and the only way I know that is the white chip again can't stop getting emotional over that play. Does where you are now, do, normally I would say, does it all make sense? But does the trauma that you went through then and where it led you now, it's there less shame and guilt knowing that you got through it and that you're living a better life and are doing the vital work that is literally life saving.
I so appreciate that, and it made me emotional to hear you get emotional of it. And I need that reminder on a daily basis because when you say it like that,
I
yeah,
believe you have my number. I'll
yeah, I
get
know.
you the new one after the show.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
hope your wife doesn't mind. The reason why I'd say that is you and your wife, really, you and your family are so adorable in every picture I see, in every post I read. You, there's so much love in your family, and so that is why I bring them up, because it's so that's such a vital part of recovery from anything. But I interrupted you
No. Please keep going.
to
It's
give
beautiful.
you another compliment.
Yeah. We often talk in like sweeping terms about the work that we do and what's anybody that does any work knows that like day in, day out, it's not that. You have to be reminded of what it is. Like some days are better than others, most days are worse than those, and so it's you have to remind yourself why. I mean, like we moved it like it was hard to move. We had to switch schools for my daughter. I mean, it's like there's so much sacrifice that everybody in a family has to make to be able to follow a dream like this. And we kind of talk about it in terms of like, and then we just walked into Florida and changed the world. And it's like, no, it was hard at every turn, and it continues to be hard. And we don't have the friends or support that we had in Arizona here. And um we miss so much about Tucson also. And so it's nice to be reminded about the big picture, because like at the end of the we would all say, everybody would say like, oh my God, if we touch one child in the audience today, it's worth it. If we change one life, and I get to work in a field where like people are still alive because of the work that we do. And people reach out and say like, at the very first preview of the White Chip, someone came forward and said like, I'm an alcoholic, but I'm not sober right now. And so Joe Tapper, our amazing performer, said like, okay, here's here's my phone number. I want you to stay in contact with me. And 14 days in, they reached out to say, like, I have 14 days. And so thank you so much. And so to get to be a part of work like that and to be able to make art like that. When I was 22, I started a theater company called Dad's Garage in Atlanta, and they're still running today. But I did it because we all thought the most punk rock thing
Hold
in the
on,
world.
hold on. Please tell me how you came up with the name of that theater company.
So that it's like a lot of stories about the name in the Little Rascals. They have an episode where they put
Oh,
on a show and they call it Dad's Garage, and so we stole that name from them. Um, but we started. We were all 22. We started it. It was not a great business plan, but we it still
but
runs
they're somehow still running
still
to
runs
this
today. Yeah,
day.
yeah, and so.
So you and they must have done something right to continue on to this day.
Yeah. But we thought it was the most punk rock thing in the world to do theater. We were going to change the world by making plays. And along the way, I think that was true when we were 22. And then along the way, you spend time being like, okay, well, let's make sure that subscribers can still have their seats from last year. And let's, we got that board member that hates women. So let's make sure that we make sure that she isn't, who's she upset with this month? And, too much, too many this and that. And so you lose that original impulse along the way. And I will say, getting into the Recovery Project, commissioning playwrights, figuring out that starts to have that punk rock feeling again of like we actually may save the world by doing theater. And it's nice to get back in touch with that. And so I'm so inspired by even just hearing you talk about it. I'm so grateful for you talking about it because it reminds me on, even after this, when I have to go make some Excel sheets and turn them in, it's like I'm not gonna run out and save the world. I'm gonna do some paperwork because
Yeah.
it's the end of the week and we got to get it in. So it's nice to be reminded of the big picture.
Yeah, and it's like with Jason Biggs, like I'm very heartened to hear uh, that his sobriety story, and I haven't heard it, and but and he's an actor among other things, and the franchise that the movie franchise that we know him best by is, of course, American Pie.
Yeah.
And there's no shortage of drinks, drugs, and that contrast is very revealing and very illuminating to what you guys do and how sobriety almost had to be like, in a weird sense, 007 undercover. And I mean, 007 isn't sober any time in his life, I bet. Fictional character. But yeah, it's really interesting that recovery had to be undercover, and some can be out there more readily, but a lot can't. And so, how do you balance that? Is it all about the shame and guilt that recovering addicts have? And we can even unpack that word and the addict. Uh, but is the stigma all about the mistake and the shame and guilt attached to that mistake and the destructive nature, and how that mistake or mistakes have touched other people's lives? Why do you think people are so uncomfortable about the vulnerability of recovery, and why do they rely and feel more comfortable stigmatizing the bravery of recovery from your vices?
Well, I think, we just did a project, an anti-stigma project in the Tampa Bay area, and then we had USF as our research partner work with us afterwards to see how effective the work that we did is. And what we found is that we were able to lower stigma on almost every level. But also, what we found is that stigma is significant and it's in lots of different ways. And so, and from self stigma to institutional stigma, which is like, how if you want to get sober, like what are the rules that are in your way, or you know, it, people go to rehab for 28 days. Not because that is a scientific number, that is because that is what insurance will pay for you to go away. So like that's not even like scientific based. That's just the average insurance will pay for you to go away for 28 days. And so like that's institutional issues and stigma to say like, oh my God, if you need more than that, you must really be in trouble. I think the stigma is real, and I just think, you know, uh, I know a lot of sober people. So we did a campaign where we asked people to record 1 minute stories. And for so many of them, it was their first time kind of coming out and putting it forward. And they're talking, these are people that have been sober for 6, 7 years, 10 years. Like their family knows, but they don't talk about it. So it is, I think, and listen, even in my own experience, I'm sure that it's cost me jobs in like ways that I don't know about. People are just nervous. Like, what are you gonna, can you talk to donors? Can you show up to parties? What if you get stressed? What's the, and it doesn't matter. If I had had cancer, they wouldn't be like, what if you have a cancer relapse? What if you have a cheeseburger? What are you gonna,
Yeah,
like they wouldn't from any other, if you had diabetes, right? Like any other disease or to a certain degree, HIV, like if it feels like if it's under control, all right, it's under control. But we know when it comes to addiction that it is, the stigma is so deep that it makes you untrustworthy or erratic a decade after you've last used, that people are still nervous about what it is that's ticking inside you. And so I think that's the anti-stigma work that we have to do is one about just like if you're struggling, ask for help and get help and know that recovery is possible, right? That is almost the first step. And then the second step is community-wide stigma, which is to say, like, how do you support those people? How do you let them talk about it? How do you figure out how to create ways that it's safe for them to talk about? And for workers, for recovery friendly workplaces, which is I think so hard but will have to happen, how do you create a recovery friendly place where if somebody is struggling they can come forward and say I'm struggling, and they will be given help and resources like they would for anything else, and not just fired or written up? Because obviously, like, nobody wants to go to their boss and say that they're struggling with cocaine. Nobody wants to go to their
no,
boss and say like I'm drinking at lunch, because you're smart to do that because chances are you will get in trouble right
yeah,
away. And so
yeah.
like how do you really create a place where people can go and get help in the same way that you would with any other disease? And I feel like that's a big jump, but it's possible in our lifetime if we dedicate ourselves to it.
So, well, there are so many what other questions I want to ask, and so many other areas we can go. That's how good of friends we are, Sean. I don't know if you know that, but I I hope you know you always have a place here. And I hope you will come back
Oh,
for
of course. I'd
another
love.
episode. Uh, I like to end every episode by asking the same 2 or 3 questions. In case there's anyone listening or watching this episode who really wants to get involved in reducing
Oh,
stigma
you froze.
and
Oh, you froze for a little. What was the first question?
oh, sorry. So in case there is anyone listening or watching this episode and they want to get involved in reducing stigma, in helping people change their lives for the better, but they're just getting into the professional sphere, uh, what would be some action steps you would give them on how to get started?
uh, if anybody is listening and is struggling, the first thing to know is that 60 million people are currently living in recovery. So it is possible. They are in your community, they are around you. I've never been to anywhere where there's not multiple different types of 12-step meetings, whether it's smart recovery, AA, that type of thing. The other thing is that like the internet is great. You can download podcasts and listen to recovery experts. You can watch videos. You can just do a little investigating on your own to be able to track them down. And then there are, if you go to the SAMHSA, which is the government department that handles recovery, they have a phenomenal website just to find resources that are in your town, which is samhsa.gov, and they can show you what providers are nearby that you can see whether they take your insurance or not. And then I would also say, 988 is always available if you are really struggling and you need to talk to someone right away. But the bigger idea is just that recovery is possible. And with the internet, there's, I feel like I got, when I was struggling, there wasn't as much online. And so I might at 4 in the morning have been looking for what those things were and can't find it, but now you can track down tons of podcasts, tons of
Yeah.
video, and that may just help you to be able to go out and to meet with people. The other thing I would say is that I would encourage you to, at least at the beginning, to find a 12-step meeting room to be able to go to. That wasn't the full answer for me, but they are available. They are in every town. And if you walk in and you say, like, I don't know what to do, people will come forward and help you. And I guess I would leave you with this thought. Um, if you think about this, just like structurally, right? So regardless of what you think about AA, people go and they walk in and they tell strangers their story. And because of that, a vast majority of them don't die. So like
Yeah.
that's not science, that's not diet, that's not medicine, that is just the idea of sitting with strangers and sharing your story stops some people from dying. And I think that's because we know that the opposite of addiction is not abstinence. The opposite of addiction is community. And so
Yeah.
I would encourage anybody who is struggling to get involved with a community because that will be your best step.
Thank you. One last question before I let you go get to those exciting
I
spreadsheets.
know they're coming. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
due.
I mean, they're chomping at the bit. uh, I'd like to think that both advocates with disabilities and those who have yet to discover and embrace their own disabilities listen and watch this show. And groups within said groups. I'm not naive enough to think that everyone takes away the same things from every episode. So, as my guests, what do you hope that advocates with disabilities take away from this episode? And what do you hope that those who have yet to discover and embrace their disabilities all go down their road of recovery take away from this episode?
I guess I'm so stuck on the idea of post-traumatic growth. And so I think for any of us, in recovery, anybody with a disability, the idea that like trauma happened and is real, and that doesn't discount or make it any less painful than it was, but the idea that there are things that you can accomplish now that you couldn't before, or there are things that you can accomplish that the average person cannot because they don't have your disability or they don't have your series of unfortunate experiences that have brought you here. I think for me that makes so much sense because I don't know a single person that doesn't have trauma in their life, and I don't know a certain person that doesn't have
They
some.
don't exist.
They don't
They
exist, and
don't
everybody has
exist.
some disability, whether it is small or large, or you know.
visible or
That's right.
non-visible.
That's right. Or what it is, or, or suffers, has a tough family or tough relationships. Or everybody is going through something. And so the idea of like, how do you focus on what you can do now that those awful things happen to you? I think for me is a real breakthrough in how I frame going forward. Because a lot of time, I think about what my career would be if I hadn't been fired at the height of it, right?
Yeah,
It'd probably be good, like it probably would have kept going. But to be able to say like, well, that wasn't what was in store for me. What is in store is
yeah,
for them because I couldn't do this unless those experiences had happened.
yes. And if someone wants to get in touch or find out more about the vital work that the Recovery Project does, what is the best way to do that, my friend?
My personal website is just my name, Sean D. Daniels. So there's two D's there. And then so SeanDDaniels.com. And then you can click on the Recovery Project and then you can see more information there.
Well, John, I want to thank you for coming on, for being as unflinching and as vulnerable as I've always known you to be. I hope you get me a signed copy of the White
Oh my
Chap,
God, of
a
course, of course, of course. Yeah.
play that I will always hold in the highest esteem. And it's just so wonderful to reconnect and to learn about the vital and life saving work you and your family and your community leaders and everyone you come in contact
Oh,
with is doing. And it's been a incredible honor to interview you
oh,
today.
thank you. And thank you for the work that you're doing. It makes such a difference. I'm so inspired by you. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Have a great weekend and we'll be in touch soon.
All right. Thank you, my friend.
Bye.